So thanks Nick and Jordan for inviting me here today to talk a little bit about hacking success and 5 life hacks. I think in the title that I sent you earlier was 3 life hacks. We got up to 5 today. I put together this deck and it follows a beautiful logical order, but I think I'm going to rearrange it a little bit, still use the same message, but I want to tell a slightly different story. Because I know you guys are all innovators and you're in a space that creates the atmosphere and the opportunity to collaborate and to be creative. And that's a lot of what I want to talk about. But I want to start with a paperclip contest. So the paperclip challenge, I will call this. So you guys all have a paperclip that I gave out earlier. How many ways can you think of to use it? For paper?
Picking a lot.
Picking a lot?
I use it for getting the SIM card.
A lot of that has to do with the brain. I've done a lot of work for the National Institute on Drug Abuse about addiction and addiction prevention, which, as you can imagine, prevention is a lot easier to do than cures. So it's all about hacking the brain, in my view. So I spend a lot of time thinking about the brain. Does anyone else ever think about your brain? Do you ever think about your brain? Yeah? Who? Yeah? Wow, what do you think about?
What the other 80% do.
The other 80%ers? Can you explain that a little more?
No, you only use 20% of your brain, so you're thinking about what the other 80% is actually.
Well, so interestingly, I've had an argument with an educator and neuroscientist about that very thought. No, you use your whole brain, he says. Now, the brain's capacity might be 80% greater than what we tap into, but we use our whole brain, so it's a little bit of a misnomer, a little bit of a misunderstanding. Who else thinks about your brain? Yeah?
I have a friend who's like an expert on brain, so it's always, forget all the terminology, but when somebody gets hijacked, the reptilian brain. So it's very interesting to think of your own reactions through that filter, what the brain functions to do.
Right. So we're primed for the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. So when you're scared, when the saber-toothed tiger is running after you in the savannah, you freeze, or you fly, you run. Our brain can't process anything else when we're in that flight, fight, or freeze mode because it takes over our brain. It's an automated response. Our brain signals do that automatically. It's very hard to override, and often, because we live in a stressful world, the stress response is the same as if a saber-toothed tiger is chasing you in the savannah. Interesting, huh? So you cannot really think mindfully. You can't create, you can't problem solve if your brain is constantly in stress mode.
Is that why they give drugs to soldiers sometimes to overcome maybe that kind of natural, or will you do that?
Well, you mean in the field of battle, or?
Yeah, historically people have been attachments to sort of like keep them energetic, obviously because it's in the vaccine is part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But part of that was, as I understood, to sort of like try and dampen down that natural.
I don't know about in the field of battle. I do know that after returning veterans come home and they're treated for PTSD, sometimes they use drugs for treatment. Increasingly, a friend of mine, this is kind of interesting when we're talking about treating the brain and trauma, and the stories that recur in the brain without our even being aware of them, because that's what trauma is. It's a repeated story based on some experience that you've had in the past, and it's pretty uncontrollable. A friend of mine is a yoga instructor, and they've used yoga extensively now in treatment of PTSD. And she's been working, she was at Walter Reed, she was working with the Army to try to integrate some of these treatments based on yoga, and specifically something called Yoga Nidra, which is a relaxation technique, but it is a form of yoga. And the Army, the military said, oh, we can't do yoga.
So downward dog before you pick up the gun.
We can't do yoga. That's like girly stuff. I'm sorry. So they renamed it. Now they call it iRest, Integrative Restorative Yoga, Integrative Restorative Practices. It's the same thing. but it's now palatable. So these big returning veterans who've suffered trauma and don't want to really go in too deep to look at what's in their own brains, they are now undergoing this treatment and it's had great success. There's a lot of research that's being done on the effectiveness of eye rest, even though it's a yoga practice. So it's all in what you call it.
What does this do for them?
What is, pardon me?
You said it has great success. What does that mean? What is it done?
Oh, it's a way of it's a relaxation technique, and a conscious relaxation technique, and it's a way of being very safe and integrated in your body while you examine these things that trigger you, and then transform them mentally.
Is it any different from like regular meditation?
It's a very specific form of meditation, but there are other forms of meditation that as I understand it, are being used too. It's just, this is somebody I've known for a long time, so I know she's had a lot of success doing this, and the group that she's affiliated with is doing the research behind it. So meditation per se, I don't know how much research is being done for the treatment of trauma in the military. That's her specific niche. So it's just kind of interesting. So anyway, you guys did 15 out of 200, not bad. I want you to put that in the back of your minds, and we'll come back to it later. So finding your passion. I know you guys are all here because you're entrepreneurs, you're doing very cool things, you've already found your groove, you're in the flow. Did anyone ever teach you how to do it? Who here went to school to learn to follow your passion? Really? How did you do that?
I was in high school and I realized that in class I drew more than I paid attention. So I figured I didn't want to spend a life in a cubicle, so I'd rather, what I'm doing when I'm bored is what I like doing, and I should probably pursue a career in it.
But did somebody teach you how to do it?
Do you draw or just pursue the passion?
Pursue the passion.
No, I went on.
Okay, someone else raised their hand. Yeah?
Yeah, I went to college to learn how to do graphic design, which is
Graphic
now
design.
a passion.
Yeah, so interesting. Design is a theme here. I mean, you guys are all into design. So this time travel adventure that I wrote, it's geared towards middle school aged kids. It's about a STEM smart 13-year-old girl named Charlie Morton, and she wants to be a modern day Renaissance girl. And who was the ultimate Renaissance genius? Of course, Leonardo da Vinci, right? Design. And so for the middle school science fair, she finds what she considers Leonardo's plans for a time machine, but he didn't have the science or technology to build it, and she does. So she builds Leonardo's time machine, a model of it for the science fair, and thanks to a little bump and a wayward kiss from the cute kid, the jock in class, she ends up bumping into the time machine, winging back 500 years over 6 time zones, and landing in an empty field in the blackest of midnight under a hail of cannon fire. And that's how the story begins. So how does the story end? Well, you'll have to read the book. It's coming out on Leonardo da Vinci's 565th birthday, which is April 15th of this 2017. So I invite you all to get a copy or share it with somebody you love who may have children, or you may have children yourself, or if you are a child and you like Leonardo da Vinci, or time travel, or science fiction. So time travel with me a little bit. We started to get into this in high school. You doodled. You've probably seen Leonardo's notebooks that have doodles all over. I'll show you an example later of Leonardo's doodles. What does your 5-year-old self dream about? Just mentally think about it. Put yourself in your own 5-year-old body.
So I had it very clear. It was one of my first memories is, unfortunately showing my age here, is that at 5, it was probably 4 actually, I got intrigued about space. So I have a memory of sitting in a cupboard with the door open, with a space helmet on, a space suit on, which my parents often bought me, and watching Apollo take off, one of the Saturn rockets. So it's about probably 1970. So it's about Apollo 13 probably. But I remember shaking the covers to look like it, feel like it was the same kind of shaking as those guys. But when you get to 12,
yes.
I get to kind of space shuttle time. So that's when that sort of like came out. So that's always been my dream. That's the thing I've always.
So from Apollo 13 to the space shuttle.
Yeah,
and-
I've always wanted to go to space, and the only way I know I'm going to get into space is either give grants of £250,000, or which is in my will, is I get cremated and shot into space.
Oh, you're not going to
So-
be part of the Mars generation?
Maybe we talked about that one way. Maybe not.
Is that something you do? Are you involved in rocket science in any way?
Actually intrigued by it, but not.
Okay. Anyone else? What does your 5-year-old self dream about? Come on, you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, it was mostly a mix between like being a warrior or also like being an explorer. So both of them had kind of that warrior context there.
Yeah. How about
An inventor.
an inventor? And are you an inventor now?
Not really.
Not really. No, you just run things for inventors.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Facilitate.
So sometimes you don't have to be that thing yourself. You can, just as you wanted to go into space, you can do it vicariously, or you can support other people who are doing the things that you dream about doing. How about any of the women? Do you have any things you've dreamed of as a 5-year-old? And yeah,
I wanted to be a princess.
you wanted to be a princess.
Wanted to be a castle, a big castle.
A big castle. Yeah. Do you live in a castle now, by any chance? All right. Sometimes these dreams get deferred a little bit, but I see a future for you in a castle, even if it's visiting Ireland and vacation. Did you?
I'm sorry, I was pointing at your books, but yes, I wanted to be an artist.
An artist. And are you an artist now?
In some ways,
What,
I
what-
create, I'm in marketing, so there is a lot of...
So you're a creative person. Yeah, yeah. So it's just interesting to think about that. We go through an evolution in our life, and what we want to be as a 5-year-old may change when you're 15 or when you're 40. But we can always become who we want to be in some way. It might not be the original form of being blasted into space like the Apollo astronauts, but it could be your ashes are cremated and sent up in a rocket. So cool. Because I am fascinated with this brain science stuff, I have done a lot of writing. I do a lot of translational neuroscience. So what that means in my world, it means something different to scientists, but what it means in my world is I write about technical developmental neuroscience and psychology, and translate it for lay audiences, plain language kind of writing, or videos and things like that. And I've done a lot of work for the National Institute on Drug Abuse. They have a teen project where it's about prevention. It's called Pure X. They have a blog called the Cerebellum blog, S-A-R-A, not the cerebellum, C-E-R-E, play on words. And so talking about the brain to teens meant I had to learn about teen brains, because we know teens are in a very different space. They take on risky behaviors. They may act like they hate you one day, and I remember when I have 3 kids. When my daughter was about 13, I glommed onto this book, Mom, I hate you, but first would you take me and Cheryl to the mall? That's so like a teen brain, and I was curious to know what that was really about, how adolescents think and why it's so different. And so what I've learned in my research and in writing about developmental neuroscience is that teens actually have a flowering in your brain that's very similar to what you do when you're for newborns through the age of 3, which is that there are all these synapses and neurons, and the connections completely change in those teen years. So that's why it's so formative for anyone here who has ever been a teen or has raised teens or will be raising teens at some point. It's really important to know that it's not just hormones that kick in to make teens act funky the way they do, or love you one day and hate you the next until you drive them to the mall. It's really a biological process in the actual functioning and development and pruning of the brain. So I just thought that was really interesting. In a lot of ways, we are counter-programming everything that was taught between the ages of 0 and 7. So we grow up, we go to school, we take in a lot of messages from the environment, from our families, from our teachers, and between the ages of 0 and 7, kids are not a blank slate. They are sponges. They're soaking in everything and learning from the world and their environment and their authority figures and people they love, how to behave and what's expected of them in the world. So we talk about mindfulness. As a parent, I wish I'd known this when my kids were little. I might have approached their raising them a little differently. They turned out okay, by the way, just PS, but you know, just from what I know now. So you revise early childhood when you get to adolescence because suddenly you question everything. What your parents told you, what the teachers tell you is not a given, it's not automatic. But you know what, in school we're not raised, we don't set up schools to encourage kids to really ask those questions respectfully and explore them. You have to do it on your own if you're doodling, or you have to do it on your own if you are lucky enough to be in a creative school like a performing arts school or a graphic design school where you can really tap into that. But most schools are set up where you sit at a desk and you listen and the teacher talks. If you're lucky and you behave well, you do a project, a team project, and that's really fun. So just to think about, and this is something that I think about with my project with Edge of Yesterday, is how could we teach kids to learn like Leonardo da Vinci? How could we teach them to tap into their own inner genius? And how, as adults, could we regroup? You know, we didn't get that lucky chance to do it maybe as we were growing up, but how can we tap into learning like Leonardo da Vinci ourselves to recoup some of that so that we can become more of who we really are meant to be and follow our passions? So you notice I did this as a story. That was my own thought experiment. Stories are universal. Again, there's no brain science on stories now. Who would have thought? So stories are pretty universal. We all tell them. We all hear them growing up. We all have stories about ourselves that we present to the world. And we have interpretations of stories that we learn from other people, right? And the face that other people present to us, and that forms our reality in many ways. But if you take yourself out of time, and this is where my time travel theory goes in, if you take yourself out of time, you get a chance to have some perspective on it. You know, the daily dramas, oh my God, I can't pay this bill this month, I'm gonna have to defer it, and then I get an 18% chart, oh my God, what am I? We spend a lot of our time ruminating on things that are past or that we don't that are not really productive to us. But if you can take yourself out of the drama and sort of look at it as you would look at someone else's drama on the screen, in a book, in a play, whatever is your entertainment mode, you get a different perspective on it. So I conducted a thought experiment. What would it take to be a modern day Renaissance genius? I did this at the time my kids were kind of coming into their teenage years, and I would listen in on their backseat conversations, being the soccer, lacrosse, hockey, band mom, you know. They don't think you're listening. They don't think there's a grown-up in the car driving when they're having these conversations with their friends. And I listened in because I was just curious what they talked about. And it was the daily drama, you know, I hate this person, or they're having a party and didn't invite me, or this teacher is so mean, she's giving us a test on the day we're supposed to have an assembly, or whatever it is. But they also talked about their dreams. So what did they talk about? They wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon who played the saxophone and also played professional soccer. Or they wanted to be a diplomat and a dentist. You know, big dreams. Or they wanted to change the world. So thinking about that in the context of, could a modern day Renaissance genius, if Leonardo were to appear today, you know, Leonardo was an artist, a musician, an inventor, a drawer, a sculptor, a map maker, a geographer, anatomist, you name it. He did everything. How could we even have a modern day Leonardo da Vinci, and could we cultivate that? So the story grew out of that experiment and sort of took over my life, became my passion. So, as I told you, Charlie ends up in an empty field in midnight under a hail of cannon fire, and she doesn't even know where she is. She's twisted her ankle, she can't move. It's cold, it's dark, and she's wearing, you know, teen girl clothes. Not exactly dressed for the occasion. And a man comes up to her as a cannonball rolls by her. A man comes up to her, he's wearing a cape, and she looks up and she sees that face, and she knows this is Leonardo da Vinci himself. And it turns out he's testing night warfare for his boss, Lorenzo de' Medici, the Duke of Florence. So this really flips her world around. Lots of disruption. We're in a time today in the world of lots of disruption. How you make sense of that and how you navigate and how you stick with what it is you're determined to do and bring out into the world is a challenge. And there's really no roadmap, and we don't learn this in school. I wager to say this would be more effective to learn in school than maybe some of the things the kids are sitting and doing worksheets on. But we don't learn it. So part of what I'm trying to do with this story, I've created an online interactive web platform that goes with the story. And I'm now working with a school in Baltimore and talking to other schools, middle schools, about introducing this as learning through story in science classrooms for 7th and 8th graders. So stay tuned, the pilot program is just getting started. But how do we manage disruption? Has anyone here seen Doctor Strange?
Oh.
Yeah,
Yeah, what'd you think?
it was great.
Great, really cool. The people who were here before with the high school kids were doing their VR and augmented reality, and I thought you were sitting in a movie theater that was pretty close to augmented reality. The technology has really gotten to be pretty amazing. But the story of Doctor Strange, for those who haven't seen it, is about this really, really brilliant surgeon. And he's in the midst of his career, and he gets in an auto accident, and his hands are smashed. There goes his career. He's determined to fix it, and because he can't operate on himself, he has to trust his former girlfriend, who really is not as smart as him, to be able to do the surgery for him. And it doesn't work. You know, it's still not going to restore his hands to the motor control that a surgeon needs to really do his job. And so he embarks on this radical journey. He hears about some place in India, some guru who can help him, and so he's going to find the solution. And it completely transforms, flips his world around, because the answer is not at all what he thought, but forces him to take a break from his all-knowingness, I'm the greatest surgeon in the world, to really find out how much he doesn't know and explore that as a way of manifesting his own genius. I just think this and some of the other stories that we've talked about are part of the hero's journey. So if anyone's heard of Joseph Campbell, he writes about the hero's journey. Star Wars, if you've seen Star Wars, it's all about the hero's journey. And so Doctor Strange is similarly about the hero's journey, but I would wager to say we are all on a hero's journey, and especially with the time we are going through, living through in the world today. So even a genius has to transform. And how are we transforming is my question, and how do we do this in a mindful way? So what distinguishes genius? I define mastery as knowing, learning, or investigating what confronts or challenges us. And I know you guys are all in some stage of invention and creative manifestation, so you probably all engage in these things already, but just in case you don't, I believe it's about nonlinear thinking, seeing patterns and connections in new ways, not trusting necessarily that what you believed before is going to hold true now, not even trusting that the reality that we all share or think we share in the world is the real reality. I mean, it's pretty radical when you think about it, but we've been seeing this in the movies for a very long time. I also believe, and this goes back to the education, that it's about integrating across domains. So that means you can't just learn STEM. I know STEM is like a big buzzword, and all of you probably have a science or technology background, right? Yeah, some of you. But it's not all about STEM, and in fact, STEAM is the new buzzword. It's arts and design integration into STEM, but I think it's about mastery. And so mastery is really combining all of these skills, STEM, character, and arts. And when I talk about character, who has an idea what I'm talking about? No?
Yourself.
Self?
Personality.
Personality could be. Is that permeable or is it fixed? Who yourself is?
Somewhat permeable.
Somewhat permeable. Do you ever go about consciously thinking, I want to be more creative?
I might read a book on it, the topic of it.
But you practice it?
Not really. Not like meditation.
Okay. Meditation is another way of transforming the brain. So I talk a lot about character, and by this I mean not intelligence quotient or IQ, but emotional quotient or EQ. This was a term and a book by Daniel Goleman in the 1980s that first came out, and he's done a lot of work about this. He actually works with businesses in the art of transformation. But it's really about your emotional smarts, your emotional and social genius. I think these are every bit as important. Some people call these soft skills. I think these are every bit as important as the academic skills you come out of school knowing, maybe more. So, as you can imagine, along the way of really exploring Leonardo da Vinci's life, I've been working at this for a very long time, bringing this out. I learned a thing or two about Leonardo's tricks for success, or his hacks for success. I think this is the true Da Vinci Code. It's really about breaking down mastery, the action or process of mastering a major accomplishment. And I'll go into that a little bit more. So here's Leonardo. You know, he did a few things in his life. He died at 67, which was old for the 15th century. But how many of you can say you've accomplished half of the things that Leonardo did? Not me. So Leonardo was an entrepreneur, maybe the first entrepreneur we know of. He wasn't supported in it. In fact, he couldn't go to school. He had to learn on his own. He taught himself Latin and Greek and Hebrew. Of course, he spoke whatever form of Italian they spoke at the time, but he wasn't allowed to go to school because he was illegitimate. Oh my God. Today we don't really think so much about that, but back in the day, the Roman Catholic Church had a thing or two to say about it. So his mastery was, and genius, you know, bringing out his genius into mastery was really a self-propelled, intrinsically motivated course of action. He followed his own path. So for me, the five key hacks, keys to hacking mastery would include this list: curiosity, collaboratory collaboration, and you guys are working in a co-working space, so you guys probably know as much about this, or maybe more than most people, but I'll go into it in a little bit in a minute. Perspective taking, that is seeing other people's point of view and integrating them into your own. So maybe you do that if you're bringing something to market and you have to market to a consumer. You have to know that consumer pretty well, who they are, what they want, what they're going to do. Resilience, which to me, if I could go back and time travel to my children's birth and raise them again, that would be the one skill that I would focus on giving them, is resilience. And you can teach these things, believe it or not, you can teach these things, and we have evidence that they are being learned. And some people are more resilient than others, we know that that's true. But you can strengthen your resilience muscle and perseverance, so sticking with something. So as entrepreneurs, you probably just want to get your stuff to market as fast as you can. I love this New Yorker cartoon. The old scientific method was you state a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, you wash, repeat until you get the exact right hypothesis and test results to support your invention, and then you go to market. Today, it's about formulate a hypothesis, get a patent, go to market, the end. I don't think we can hack the process really to that degree, and maybe you guys have a different experience than I do, but I'd be interested to hear if you do. But I think we all have to formulate some kind of path that tests and repeats, and that's what I'm in the process of doing with this pilot program. I hope you're doing it with whatever you are bringing to the world. So here's 3 steps to mastery. I'm not going to read that for you, but I do want to point out that my definition of mastery is a little different than the idea of you have to know everything to the nth degree. I think that our world is built on this idea of mastery as being the best tennis player, or being the best violinist, or being the best at something, and that requires, we know Malcolm Gladwell popularized this phrase 10,000 hours. It turns out that's been debunked. 10,000 hours is not really, it's good for things that have rules, like being the best hockey player, where you have to practice, practice, practice. Being the best tennis player or violinist, practice, practice, practice. But it turns out that not everything has a path like that. Not everything is rule-driven in the way those skills are. And probably if you're an entrepreneur, bringing whatever you're bringing into the world, the rules are a little fluid, and maybe you're inventing them as you go along. So the ability to problem solve in that environment is really important. That requires some flexibility. That requires you to take your brain offline sometimes, because I don't know about you guys, but as I was driving over here, I had this PowerPoint, this beautiful PowerPoint all set up, and I thought, this isn't the story I want to tell. And it occurred to me actually when I woke up this morning, this isn't the story I want to tell. And sometimes when you take, like I was trying so hard to put all the pieces together and it wasn't the story I wanted to tell. And so sometimes it takes taking your brain off of line. Maybe it's in the shower, maybe you're singing in your car. Whatever you do to take your brain off. Maybe it's meditating. Take your brain offline a little bit. Sometimes the answer, the eureka moment comes, and that's certainly some lesson that I learned from Da Vinci's genius. So be curious. I love this quote from Einstein. I have no special talents. I am only passionately curious. Who would describe Albert Einstein that way, besides himself? So curiosity opens a window to divergent thinking, letting different thoughts come in through the side door, not necessarily full front, or not necessarily what you're putting your mind to and working so hard to achieve. So our lives are dictated more by what grabs us in the moment than any particular rational thought process, even if we're trying really hard to be rational about it. So let's go back to the paper clips. Has anybody been taking your mind offline and come up with 150 more ways of using a paper clip?
Yeah, if you take a bunch of them, you can make a rope.
I didn't hear
If
you.
you take a bunch of them, you can make like a rope or something.
Yeah, you can take a bunch of them, put them together.
Use different colors to put on the wall for decoration.
Uh-huh.
You can put in the pool and swim in it.
Put them in the pool and swim in them?
You can make furniture with it, like chairs and tables.
Yeah.
You can flick it at people and just like get their attention.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. A little bit of a weapon there. Yeah.
There's a bunch of different ways.
Yeah. Yes?
When I was younger, we used to make necklaces with them where we'd make them together and then
Yeah.
write stickers around each. But
Yeah. So it can be jewelry. It can be a weapon. A paperclip can be anything you want it to be. It's just leaving your imagination open to find it. So I hope this, little tiny exercise gets your juices flowing, because it doesn't have to be a paperclip challenge. It could be pickup sticks. It could be Play-Doh. It could be Sculpey. It could be popsicle sticks. It could be anything you want. In fact, Charlie's design is rigged together with popsicle sticks, Lego bots, a neuroserver, a server, and a bunch of other things that she finds in her garage. So it can be anything you want. So this is Leonardo da Vinci's, one of his notebooks. This comes from the Codex I can't even say this, Vitruvianus. Maybe you can say that better. But it includes words he was trying to teach himself in vocabulary, basically. But it also has his grocery list on it. He needed to buy chicken for dinner. And as you see to our doodler here, he also did, just while he was sitting there and saw some guy on the street, he decided to do a portrait. So when you're doodling, it unloosens. It's another way of unloosening that creative gene, that creative brain, divergent thinking. So the second key, I think, is collaboration. And I use collaboration a little differently than most people, because I think about science and scientists and how they discover things, and how it's not a linear process at all, and how the great discoveries are not necessarily done all at once. So scientists build on and steal each other's works constantly. And it's not only allowed and legal, but it's encouraged, because that's how science evolves. And actually, it overthrows old science to create new science. So, I like this John Lennon quote. A dream you dream alone is only a dream you dream together is reality. So, this is a little out of order. So this is how scientists dream together. So we know Leonardo actually knew about gravity 100 years before Newton. He just didn't have the math to pin it down or to write it up. In fact, he didn't consider himself a mathematician at all, but many of his designs, his architecture, his bridges, his canals were actually mathematically accurate designs. But then, of course, Newton came along. He proved gravity, at least in the physical world, using math. And then there is a woman, actually, her name is Emily du Châtelet. Anyone hear of Emily? Yeah. So she was an 18th century physicist, mathematician, and philosopher. She was a consort of Voltaire. I mean, this was an amazing woman. She used to gamble and win in the court of Louis XV. She dueled with the duel master in the court and won. And she had 4 kids along the way. An amazing, amazing woman. She actually laid the foundation for Newton's relativity. She came up with the square in the force equals mv squared, as opposed to people were trying to say, oh, it's mv2, you know, it's, you double it. No, she came up with the square, which laid the foundation for Einstein to come up with E equals mc squared as the proof for relativity. So it's interesting that all of these build on each other over a course of centuries, from the 1500s, early 1500s, all the way to the early 1900s. 400 years of science overturns but stands on the shoulders of the one who came before them. So genius is iterative. The third principle is perspective taking. And in the case of entrepreneurs or innovators, you have to think of who you're innovating for. So how many people here, are you guys bringing a new product to market? What are you doing? Shout out. What's your business? Nobody has a business yet?
Services.
Services?
Yeah.
Innovative services?
Marketing communication services.
Oh, yeah. Anybody else? I know in the back you have a nonprofit. Yeah.
Improving a current product.
Improving a current product.
Adding more customers.
So do you ever take the perspective of your customers when you're in the process of building, designing, creating, innovating, improving? How do you do that? Do you know your customers? Have you met them? Yes. Tell me about that.
Previously, when I sign up customers that use our product,
Mhm.
watch how they use it, what their pain points were, what do they want to improve. So,
And do you incorporate that market testing feedback into your next iteration? Great, great. Does everybody do that already? And does it ever change the way you think? Something should be, you know, like you have in your mind the way something should work, or the way something, if you're in marketing, you're helping your clients ostensibly run through this process, right?
It's a big part of it.
Pardon me?
It's a big part of it.
It's a big part of it. So perspective taking and putting yourself in your customer shoes or your investor shoes or whoever it is really very important to be more successful at hacking mastery. Oops. So divergent thinking again. This is thinking sideways, inside out, backwards, upside down. Name some modern divergent thinkers. I mentioned Leonardo, of course, was maybe an original in that. Does anyone have any ideas? You know, really quick.
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Great. Who else? Who else? Steve Jobs. Yeah. How about Sal Khan? Do you guys know about Khan Academy? So even in the nonprofit space, there are some really innovative, divergent thinkers. So thinking divergently, thinking differently is really critical to innovation and creativity. Resilience, we're all carrying the world on our shoulders, but in a thriving economy, in an economy that we're living in today, that's shifting, and it values the new over the tried and true, it's sometimes hard to follow the unpaved path and be resilient in the face of what's going on in the world, but it's really critical. So taking time, to me that means partly taking time to sleep, eat well, meditate, or whatever your practice is for relaxation, even if it's playing video games or going to a movie or hanging out with friends. And these things can be learned. So has anybody heard about mindset research? No? What do you think of in terms of mindset?
I'm actually in the middle of reading that book right now.
Yeah? Carol Dweck's work is great. Yeah. So mindset is not about, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna master this, I'm gonna be the biggest and the best, I'm gonna make $1 million. It's really about the difference between thinking, I can't do this, I was not good at this in school, I'll never make it, versus I can do better, and I have incentive to do better, and I can become more of who I'm meant to be. I can develop better resilience, better character qualities, better social and emotional skills. So it's just important to adopt a growth mindset. Taking on challenges helps you do that, and not defeating yourself or overriding your growth mindset by saying, I can't do it, or my mom told me that I was really bad at this, or whatever is limiting you. So, and then perseverance. So we're all determined to do well and to succeed, but sometimes we are planting a seed for future generations. Just as Leonardo could not have known about Emily du Châtelet, could not have known about Einstein, sometimes, and this Methuselah is actually a seed from an ancient date tree that's extinct, that they've grown from the seed by germinating it with a modern day close relative of that, and it's now germinating into its own son of Methuselah's in the present day. It went dormant, it was dead, these were extinct. So people are trying to do that with dinosaurs, I know, but so far Methuselah is it. So Da Vinci had limited technology but great ideas. We don't know how he got into the flow of these ideas. He designed a helicopter, he designed airplanes, he designed scuba gear, he designed a bridge that could span the Bosphorus between Europe and Asia, the channel between Europe and Asia. But again, hacking success from a time traveler's perspective means learning, unlearning, and relearning for life, and trying a different perspective on your innovations. So I'd like to invite you all to take this challenge, not now necessarily, although you can take notes if you want, but write a letter to your future self, using the perspective of your company or your life, whatever you prefer to do. What does that you look like 1 year from now, or 5 years, or 50 years? It's a really good experiment because you have to then project yourself into the future. Where do I want to be? And it may shift the course of your direction. You may take a new path. You may let some other ideas in. So I will close with that. I have some more slides, but I know you guys want to get back to work. Any questions I'm happy to answer or try to answer. I would also say that I am a coach. I work with companies to manifest more of this idea of following your mastery, following your bliss, and breaking open from the perspective of creativity, curiosity, perspective taking, resilience, perseverance, and so on. And I would love to help you guys out if you have a need. So my email is robin@edgeofyesterday.com. And also, I will say, here I'm going to flip forward. So watch out for it. My book, Edge of Yesterday, it's going to appear April 15th, 2017. I hope to have a big event. I'll keep you all apprised. If you want to leave me, I have a clipboard that you can sign up on. If you want to leave me your information, I'll be in touch with you. And follow edgeofyesterday.com. There's a website. I'm on social media. Charlie is tweeting the story herself. But follow us on social media, and I would love to interact with you in that space. So thank you. Any questions before we go? No? Yes?
You have a question. So you want to encourage people to think like Leonardo da Vinci, but it seems like his actual life was marked by a lot of kind of social rejection, isolation, being kind of considered an outsider. How does that reconcile with what we're basically programmed to be in society?
Yeah, that's a great observation, and it's true. He was a social outcast, although he was a very charming man and beautiful to look at. He had a lot of friends, and he liked to play jokes on people. Like, he invented a whoopee cushion and used it at parties that he would throw. So he had to try very hard to fit in, and it wasn't natural for him because he was ostracized by the powers that be. I don't know about you, but as a creative person myself, I find myself sometimes on the outside looking in. I don't think that's a bad thing all the time, because it forces you to think differently and to create alliances with like-minded people. But also, you have to reach outside yourself and stretch a little to talk to people who aren't like you, because that's where the ideas really flow, and that's where you test your market. That's where you find out what's going to work with people who are, more in the mainstream, perhaps. So, a very good question. Anyone else? No? Yeah? No?
I'd say.
Oh, okay. I'm not the only person who thinks about Leonardo's brain. This is a book called Leonardo's Brain. It's a virtual autopsy of what his brain must have looked like to enable him to do the things he did. It's by a physician. He died a couple of years ago, Leonard Swain, but it's an excellent book if you're interested in finding out how to be more like Leonardo.
So yours.